I'm Phoebe. I am the program manager of the voice team at Gridspace. So we're the team responsible for the speech to text, the text to speech. And I've also been the main point working on our new emotion functionality with Grace. So Grace, our voice bot, we've been working to her not just recognizing the caller's emotion, but also like internalizing her own kind of emotional state and responding and guiding a conversation according to those inputs and outputs.
What does emotion recognition mean?
So emotion recognition is often like confused with sentiment analysis. So sentiment analysis, I'd say people is more like what you're saying. So people do that with reviews, right? Like what are people trying to convey? Whereas an emotional state is more of an internal state that drives people's conversation. So emotion detection to me is not just kind of recognizing what someone is saying in a given utterance, but what they're feeling that is driving them to say that. And that's more of a multi-turn state. That's more of a driving factor in conversations. It makes use of both. So our emotion recognition model operates off the outputs from a conformer encoder. So it has access to all of the information from the speech, both tone and text. And we do see it use both. So like apologetic is one of our outputs. We see that key off the word sorry a lot. But then gracious and surprise very much keys off tone of emotion from what I've observed. So kind of what I was saying earlier about just callers being heard and a conversation not feeling not just robotic, but downright rude and uncomfortable. Emotion, being able to detect another person's emotion and like relate to another person is a communication skill that humans use a lot. And like we're very good at holding a conversation with that as part of our toolbox. If a voice bot isn't keying off your tone of voice, if it isn't making conversational decisions based on the tone that you're giving it, then the conversation stops feeling human and also stops being helpful to the person. It can feel rude, it can feel dehumanizing, but it can also just like cause a conversation to like take longer if you're not picking up that kind of information that is being given. And again, being able to maintain that across multiple states gives the voice bot a feeling of continuity and a feeling of it being a two-directional conversation. Like the voice bot is there to help you. So not just for like efficiency of a conversation, but also just for making a conversation feel comfortable for the human. So sarcasm is one that I think it's very hard to pick up from text. Like the text can look identical and mean a completely different thing based on tone of voice. So that one would, if we were labeling for it, be entirely tone dependent. And luckily, like, this isn't always true, but at least American sarcasm tends to be very, like, the sarcastic tone of voice is a pretty easily identifiable marker. So a correctly labeled data set for sarcasm based on tone of voice should be able to pick that up reasonably easy. We label for humor. We don't treat sarcasm as an emotion. Yeah, that would be mostly tone of voice, I imagine. Hey, Goose.
Grace read a dog's emotion?
Don't know, does the dog bark with different, is there a labeled dog barking emotional data set? One use case that we've been rolling Grace out for is medical reasons. And a lot of that is checking up on people just out of hospital or like checking up on elderly people. And those are the exact kind of situations where having like a modicum of concern, especially if like for elderly people, they're like lonely or need to just talk. Emotional response is actually extremely important in making the calls not actively negative for them. Like if you're feeling alone and someone calls you to check up on you, but it's a robot that is just outsourced and is just like going through the motions, that can be actively negative. As opposed to if there is at least some understanding or like emotional response, if you're responding to say like, I'm lonely. I think it changes a phone call from something that maybe shouldn't happen to something that can actually have a positive effect.